Man, grab that bong and slam it on that dong. What's good, y'all? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. So, at the time of this recording, it's been about almost a week since our official reveal and direct for the Nintendo Switch 2 and all of the games and features that are going to be coming along with it. In that Nintendo Switch 2 direct, they really went out of their way to prove that this is a very large leap from the Switch 1 in terms of power and output. Which makes a lot of sense considering the fact that the Nintendo Switch at this point in time is basically almost a decade old. The Switch 2 is just so technically impressive because even in handheld, it's running 1080p 120 frames on a lot of games. And the thing with Nintendo is that a lot of their games are just so generally technically impressive that they're still fun to play regardless of if they were a little bit weaker. But now, we're playing with some serious power, which is why it's so incredibly exciting to see something like Pokemon Legends ZA actually running smoothly. Pokemon Legends ZA being one of the very few hand-selected games to get a Switch 2 upgrade is such a relief, because if there was any game that really needed to start a massive change, it was Legends ZA, for sure. However, the fun doesn't stop there. Now, while there are a handful select of games that are getting dedicated Switch 2 upgrades, there are also going to be other games not mentioned that are going to be getting very specific updates. These updates are going to be completely free, and some of the games listed here include ARMS, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, Super Mario Odyssey, 3D World and Bowser's Fury, Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening and Echoes of Wisdom, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So yeah, me personally, I'm sure like a lot of you, have a couple of questions in regards to what this update could possibly mean, especially for something as divisive as Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, something that desperately needed an update for years now. Why we're getting it this late in the game is beyond me, but you know what? Better late than never. So, while we're having a quick chat about this, why don't you go ahead, grab yourself some kind of a dessert, because I won't take up too much of your time. May I recommend some flan, and you could dab some ketchup on there, while we talk about what this update could possibly mean for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So, first and foremost, the most obvious thing that anybody and everybody wants in an update for this game is a major performance update. So many people had so many problems with this game, but the biggest problems weren't the story or the gameplay in of itself. It was that this game functioned and looked like hot doo-doo cakes. And honestly, I have a very hard time blaming anybody for putting the game down, because why would they want to continue playing when they paid $60 for a game that essentially caves in on itself every time you walk around the open world, which is 90% of the time? I'm somebody that can definitely be pretty forgiving on a lot of things, which is why I was able to enjoy Pokemon Scarlet and Violet despite its major issues. But I think it's more than fair to also look at the other end of things and realize that a game that chugs along that slow, that you paid full price for, is very frustrating, because there's absolutely no reason on Shink's green earth that this game shouldn't have been finished and polished. And with Pokemon, it's an even more detrimental situation, because at the very least, we've been living in an age of like updates and things like that for major releases for years now. People always joke about day one patch this and day one patch that, but the reality of it is, there usually is some form of major day one patch for whatever reason for most AAA title games that release on major strong consoles. However, this has almost never been the case for Pokemon for some reason. Matter of fact, I can't even think of a situation in which they've actually improved on any performance issues that we've ever had for any of the Switch titles. And you know, go ahead and correct me if I'm just completely forgetting about this, but I swear on everything that I don't remember getting any form of like performance patches for Pokemon Let's Go, Pokemon Sword and Shield, or anything like that. And even if they did need those, they didn't need them nearly as badly as Pokemon Scarlet and Violet did. People were pointing out these performance issues day one, and we just heard nothing. We got no major updates that would fix any of these problems. Like, at the very least, if you're gonna put out an unfinished game, at least finish it through a couple of patches. Not to say that this is me advocating for unfinished games. Finish your games before you sell them to us, but at the very least, if you can clearly see that people are having issues with this game through performance and you have the ability to fix those problems, then put the patch out. Well, it's almost been 3 years now, so we're finally getting an update. what could this update possibly contain? Well, based on the very vague information that they gave us, it's safe to make a couple of assumptions at the very least. The first thing that's getting touched up on is for sure the frame rate. This game runs so frustratingly slow, it makes me want to rip my hair out. I know for a fact that they were paying attention to when people were pointing this out for years on end. Surely, if they're smart, the first thing that they're gonna do is patch up and fix up that frame rate. If it could run at a very stable, consistent 30 minimum, fine, I can kind of live with that. But if we can up it for the Switch 2 and make it so that it does run at a stable 60 frames, that would be absolutely joyous, incredible even. Appropriately named places like the Lag Tree Thicket could potentially finally be a thing of the past. And maybe, just maybe, things won't completely slow down to a halt as soon as more than 3 things appear on the screen. Could you imagine playing through the entirety of the Starfall Street storyline with no frame drops? Oh my goodness, Jesus, that sounds like a fever dream. Not that we're working with the same developers or anything like that, but hey, I mean, we've seen what the Breath of the Wild developers did for Breath of the Wild's Lost Woods for the Switch 2. If we could do that, we could do anything. After that, the next major point of touch-ups would need to be for the loading. Unfortunately, frame drops are not the only culprit in this game's slog of a playthrough. Flying from place to place, going into literally any menu is such a hassle because of how long it takes to get there. It's so frustrating. There is absolutely no reason that if I'm going into a clothing shop that is strictly menus, it should take as long as it does for me to see what each item looks like on my character. It's absurd how much time it takes to load in between each individual item. I should not in any way, shape, or form be deterred from going into shops in an RPG. That's ridiculous. That needs to be fixed ASAP. And don't even get me started on raid battles. Hell, generally speaking, raid battles are extremely glitchy anyway and definitely need some touch-ups. But the worst part about them is how long it takes to get to them. It's one thing if you're loading into a raid battle with people online, I can get behind that being a little bit longer. It still shouldn't be, but fine, whatever. But playing alone, it should not take damn near a full minute to fight a terrestrialized skitty. What are we doing here? Regardless, load times in this game are complete dog water and they need to be touched up immediately, just as fast, if not faster, than the frame rate situation. Which is kind of why I have a gut feeling this might also get touched up upon, but we'll have to see what happens. The next thing I have to imagine they at least looked at after the massive backlash was the textures and lighting situation. This game, at a distance, is just so horrific to look at, and it's just unfortunately not an exaggeration. Graphically speaking, it is horrid how bad this game looks at a lot of points. Compare it graphically to something like Xenoblade Chronicles X, a 10-year-old game this year, and it is embarrassing how not close it is. The overworld of an open world game should not be allowed to be released in a state like this that makes it look this unpleasant. Outside of character models and like maybe the insides of certain buildings, everything just is abysmal to look at, and they know this. They're fully aware, and we've made plenty of complaints about it. No way this update doesn't touch up a little bit of that. You know what? I'm busting it out again. My clip from my literal first playthrough of Scarlet and Violet. Oh my god, it looks like clay! Yeah, no. Nobody should have a reaction like that one within the first 10 or 15 minutes of the game. That's really bad. Fix that. And then lighting just seems like a generally reasonable thing considering the fact that there is basically no consistent lighting whatsoever in this game. It's super awkward, so hopefully they touch up on that. Not the most major thing, but if they want to at least make this game look a little bit better through this update, that's one of the things they definitely gotta at least look at. And then, you know what, while we're here, I have to imagine that they've done something to touch up the camera too, right? Maybe now the camera won't clip through the floor during trainer battles. Maybe we can actually move the camera a little bit farther out to make it more comfortable to use. Hell, maybe we'll be able to adjust how fast we're able to use it. I don't know, I just feel like that's also something that could definitely be touched up upon that shouldn't be that hard to fix. And now the last thing, this is definitely the least important because nobody's really worried about this. I don't know who's going to use it, but they're probably going to add some kind of accessibility for the mouse feature. Not sure what it's going to be, but I can imagine that's going to be there too. I can't really imagine that they're going to add a completely new feature that would make that usable. Maybe they'll add like some kind of aim thing so that we can aim at what Pokemon we're throwing our ball, but I don't know, there's already auto aim. I don't really feel like there's a point to that, but honestly, I'm sure they're going to do it still. I just don't know how. Whatever, we'll see what happens with that, I guess. So that just about does it for that. Now I'm gonna throw in a couple of things that I feel like could be possible that we really need to see in these updates. And trust me when I say this is a list of reasonable things. We've already good and well talked about everything that I want that's unreasonable. This stuff here, this is very possible after years of waiting for some form of update. For example, we need some form of hard mode. You want us to get back into this game through whatever update you're putting out? Then you need to give us some form of incentive to actually go through with that. And I feel like the best way to do that would be to add some form of difficulty mode. Make the AI a little bit smarter and make their Pokemon a little bit stronger. And guess what? We have completely new life, complete reason to go through this game again. Oh my goodness. We have seen what Master Mode has done for Breath of the Wild. Let's repeat that. Let's not gatekeep that to just Breath of the Wild. This also applies to Tears of the Kingdom, by the way. Just putting that out there. Pokemon games have always been notoriously easy, and I feel like the best way to really shift gears is to give us an actual harder Pokemon game through Scarlet and Violet in this update. And giving a completely new life will give all the more reason for people to actually go out of their way to update their game and actually play it again. So the developers aren't completely wasting their time actually patching this game up just for nobody to care because a sour taste has already been left in their mouth and they don't want to play through it again. I just think that the best incentive to get us to see all of the hard work that these devs are putting in is to give us a reason to start over. And a challenge mode, a harder mode, genuinely threatening AI, that's the way to go. Also, kind of next to that, if not that, at the very least, how about multiple save files? Firstly, we're not in the era of DS games anymore. Make it so that we can have multiple files. There's nothing wrong with having that. Second, during the DS era, there were plenty of games that had save files. Why did Pokemon never do that? At this point, the only logical reason that I could think of as to why Pokemon has never had save files, even during the most recent era of home console, is because it's tradition not to. That is it. And to that, I say, get that shit out of here! It was big 2022 and we still didn't have save files of all things in an RPG? Oh lord! Yeah, to the same degree of adding a challenge mode or at least a hard mode, I think giving us another save file would incentivize people even more to actually play through the game. Mind you, until today, I had absolutely no clue how to delete my save file in any of these games. Come to find out, you have to do it manually through the settings of the Switch. Nah, man, give me a second save file so I could just play through the game without having to eradicate my entire save file. I don't care that we have access to Pokemon Home. At this point, at the very least, give us like an in-game option to reset the file, at least. Getting Pokemon Scarlet solely so that I could do a second playthrough on my own time for a review is wild work. Please, Shinx, include this in the update. Please. And lastly, this kind of actually applies to what I was saying earlier with the whole like challenge mode situation, but maybe, if not that, then maybe like a level scaling option? The whole idea of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet being an open world game, the first open world game, is that we are supposed to be able to go to any gym or any challenge in any order that we feel like. So why is it that we're still very much so on a set path? We should be allowed to explore this world at our leisure at any pace we want in any order that we want so that we can all have actual genuine unique experiences in this game. And the best way to do that, one of the definitely easier ways you can implement this idea is through level scaling. Call me insane, but this just seems like the logical step to me. allow me to go to whatever gym and fight them at my level. But they're also appropriately leveled, so I actually have a chance against them. Imagine a situation in which we're actually free to choose, and so I get to go and fight the fairy gym leader first, or the ghost gym leader. Makes a hell of a difference, doesn't it? And that's not even mentioning the order in which we could potentially get all of Koraidon and Miraidon's abilities to traverse the world better. That could just be such a major game changer. So, long and short of it is, whatever this update is going to contain, it needs it badly. And I hope that almost everything I've mentioned in this list, reasonable or not, is implemented in some way, shape, or form to make Scarlet and Violet even worth going through again for a lot of people. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but I'm doing the thing again. I'm doing the thing where I mentioned that Cyberpunk had one of the best turnarounds in gaming history, and that this is very much possible for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet if they just lock in a little bit. You can at least do your best to try and clean this smudge, this stain that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has left on the reputation of the entirety of the franchise if you were to implement at least a few of the things mentioned in this video. There's definitely plenty of other things in terms of mechanics and things that could absolutely be implemented to fix the game in a very different way, but that's a conversation for another day. And one that we've already had, but we can have it as many times as we want, right? Anyway, long and short of it is, if at least a couple of these things aren't fixed up and the only update that we actually get is just like the addition to utilize the mouse feature, nobody's ever touching Scarlet and Violet again. So maybe don't waste developers' times and actually give us something worth going back to, is all I'm gonna say. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about does it for this one. I really do hope that nobody's time is being wasted with a potential update. I don't really care if there's new features added if the game in of itself isn't worth going back to, because a lot of us have already spent plenty of time in Scarlet and Violet, love it or hate it, we've spent our time with it. Give us something worth going back to, and then we'll be able to appreciate all of the effort and things implemented into it, even possibly whatever mechanics you utilize with the mouse feature, whatever that means. Who knows? But I hope we do see some major updates for Scarlet and Violet, because I've never seen a Nintendo game that needed it more. But we'll see what happens. But I'm passing the mic over in your direction, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you think that any of the lists that I've made here is actually reasonable, and we could potentially see some or all of those things implemented in Scarlet and Violet through the update that's probably going to be available on Switch 2, and we could see a major turnaround for the game? Or do you think that I'm off my rocker? There's no way in hell they're going to put that much effort into fixing up Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and we could completely forget about it. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do exactly that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gonzo. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!